Welcome to The Grind, a podcast about the church planting process and missional strategies to make disciples of all nations. Coming to you from the offices of the Arkansas Baptist State Convention in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, here are your hosts, Dave McClung and Chad Grigsby.
Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of The Grind. I'm Dave McClung, your lovely host, and my lovely co-host, Chadlet Grigsby, is with me as well.
And my co-host, my double chin.
See, if you grow chin hair, it helps hide that a little bit.
Well, I can't do that either, Dave. So
unless I do this.
Yeah.
And have you ever seen the movie Men in Black?
Yes.
You know, the roach dude, when he puts on the skin, it doesn't fit right?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. I don't know why that popped into my head.
No, that's awesome. That's
yeah.
a real good visual there.
Yeah. So anyway.
Sorry, Dave. That's just kind of the day I'm having.
Dude, it's
just a double chin kind of day.
It is. It's Monday and got a whole bunch of sinus drainage going on and kind of affecting the voice a little bit. And so double chins, sinus drainage, and Monday morning make for a brutal combination.
It's going to be a great podcast.
Great podcast. So anyway, well, this is, we thought we'd do another episode with just Chad and I, where we kind of talk about a couple of things. And the topic for this go around, we shot out a question to several of our church planners and said, if you had a chance to start over and do things all over again, what would you change? What would you do differently? And got quite a few responses on that, great responses. Some very well thought out. Some said I would not do it again if I had it to do over. There are several church planners that would probably agree with that and make that statement. But not really helpful for discussion purposes. But anyway, thought we'd talk through a couple of those responses and let you guys hear from some guys that are further down the road in church planting, maybe than some of you, and hear their perspective on things that they would do over, things that they're trying to fix that they didn't do in the beginning. And so we'd kind of talk through kind of the top 3 or 4 things. And so I guess, probably the number one on the list that just about everybody said is that they would slow down.
Yep.
Everybody gets real excited when they're getting ready to start a church and everything's, fast and furious and we got to get this done. We got to get to this launch date. We got to get all this stuff together and everything's just rush. And if you're not careful in the midst of all that, you lose sight of why you're doing this to begin with.
Yeah. And
can kind of get overrun with all the details and all the prep and all the planning and move toward a worship gathering and forget the disciple making and just a lot of pressure early on. And so taking some time to slow down and pray and seek God's face and know that that He's in charge of this thing, not us, and that it's not going to rise and fall on our ability to do this. If we're depending on our ability in all of this, that's not over spiritualizing this. There are things that we have to do in the process, obviously.
Yeah.
But if the church is going to make it and if it's going to grow, God's got to do it. As we've seen several examples of guys that should not have failed that did. And there are some that probably should not have succeeded, but did, because God did something. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, every church planter wants to plant yesterday. Like that's their timeline. When do you want to start church? Yesterday, because, usually when they make the decision to actually launch out and do something, it's been months, if not years, of kind of brewing in them.
Yeah.
And so they've felt the Lord leading them. Maybe they've run from the call of that, or they just they've been convinced of it, but they've not stepped out to do it. And so when they finally step out, it's just like all these months and years of waiting. They're just like, gotta do it right now,
Yeah.
So I don't know that I met one guy who's like, I just think we need to really take it slow, be intentional.
Yeah.
They're all like, we got to do this yesterday. So that's good to know that it's kind of every guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm looking at a sheet of paper with 10 responses from planters. I think we got 10 to 15 total. And every one of these guys is saying slow down. Now there's some of them are saying it in different ways. Like some are saying literally slow down.
Yeah.
that's literally slow way down is what one guy said.
Yeah.
Another guy is talking about starting more time with his small group, more time with intentionality and in core team development, more discipleship stuff. So all of what they're saying is you got to know what your runway is. You gotta make sure that you have a long enough runway to where you can take off well, and don't try to shorten your runway where you crash and burn. So those are kind of the tensions. But I would say that's everybody. If you think you need to be starting yesterday, it doesn't mean you can't start something, but don't start everything yesterday.
Right. Well, and that's one of the challenges is you're starting something new from scratch. There's no pre-existing church, and you've got to start with what you have, what resources, people, time, money, everything, and you can't start everything day one.
Exactly.
You just can't.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and you'll kill yourself. You'll kill your team, and so you got to start with what you have and do what you can do and do it well. And let it build, and it's okay. One of the things that it's always fascinating talking with church planners, particularly when they get in a building. Before they move in, they want to have everything painted, everything trimmed out, everything decked out. And there's something about showing progress and movement in that I think is encouraging to people that this is not a finished product. Don't paint all the walls, to begin with. Let's leave some cracks and crevices undone and show some progress there.
I'm sorry. I got distracted because, dude, we didn't have that mentality at all.
Right.
I'm pretty sure our children's area was hazardous at times. We got these free divider walls for our children's area that if they would have fallen over on a child, it would have been the end. I mean, it was. I don't mean to be morbid. Oh Lord. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just got tickled thinking about it. Well, we probably should have been a little more. Oh man. Yeah, it's a good point, Dave. It's a good point. Don't not just in your building, but in all respects. You got to have it completely perfect day one.
Exactly. None of your systems are going to be perfect. None of your worship stuff's going to be perfect. Technology's not going to be perfect. Your community engagement's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Learn from it, build from it, highlight, here's where we were, look at where we are now, show progress, show movement, and it just takes time. So it's always great to just take a deep breath and relax a little bit. One of the guys said, have fun when you do this. Have more fun along the way. And look, you're getting to start a new church that is going to impact people, with the gospel for hopefully generations to come. And when they start having those big church anniversaries, it'll go back to that point where a small group of people said, we need a church here for these people, and God's calling us to do it. So enjoy that process. And so slow down.
What would you say from a practical standpoint, or maybe the top two priorities that you would tell guys to focus on kind of in those early to slow down? All right, what would that look like to slow down?
Spend a lot of time in prayer. I tell you, I look back on our days with City Church in Little Rock, and we didn't pray near enough. Not that we didn't pray. I mean, we did, but we did a lot more strategy planning than prayer time together.
Yeah.
We would have done, I wish we'd have done a lot more evangelism early on. We did some community ministry projects, but we didn't always tie that to evangelism and take advantage of some opportunities that we had that those ministry projects created. And I think that's one of the big faults in a lot of our church planners is we do a lot of community engagement, but don't ever really tie it to the gospel. And, and that's a huge misstep, particularly early on, because you're building DNA and culture with your people. And if they don't see connections between your community ministry and evangelism, it'll not get there. So those are two things I would say, early on that are keys.
I was going to say too, one kind of practical step for how to get there and knowing kind of when to quote unquote start. I mean, I think you start whenever, God lays it on your heart to start planting a church. You've started, even if it's you and your family or you and one other family. But I think what we're talking about is starting all the big programs and weekly worship services. Here's what I would say. Make sure you make it criteria-based and not time-based. So what a lot of guys want to do is they want to launch at Easter. Okay.
Yeah. Which is a terrible time to launch a church. It's a great spiritual day, but you've got a month and a half before summer hits. And summer's always a downtime in church life. It just is.
Yeah. And so, that's a factor with Easter. But say you're not ready at Easter. You've committed to a timeline.
Yeah.
You've publicized that you're going to launch. You're letting time dictate your readiness rather than your readiness dictate the time.
Right.
So I would say put some steps in place. All right, when we get here, we'll go to there, and then we'll know that we're ready. So, it's that old mileposts in the old church planter training that we used to do. Mileposts. But you really do need to set those up and say, okay, when we get to this mile marker, that mile marker, and set it up that way. And listen, I'm not saying take 5 years to do that, but really 6 months to a year to get those things done, and then see where you are in the rhythm of the year. And if it's May, wait till fall.
Right.
That's what I'm saying is don't let time be the thing that pushes you, because you really can get sideways on that and do stuff when you're not ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you can start a weekend service quickly. You can't plan a church quickly. Whenever everybody, one of the big questions we get asked all the time when we have those initial conversations with a guy that senses God's calling him to plant a church, he'll ask, how much time you think it'll take from now till we launch? And I tell guys all the time, best case scenario, you're at least 6 months, depending on what kind of core team you've got, what kind of plan you've already got in place and everything, how much buy-in they have. But typically it's 9 months to a year. And there's training involved in that. There's coaching involved in that. There's planning involved in that. Nobody ever understands how much is involved in starting a church until you get into it.
Yes.
And realize all the little things that have to happen to not just plan a service. And you guys, we harp on this all the time. Don't just plan a service, plan a church that's going to make disciples that plant other churches. To do that, you've got to have systems in place and plans in place, for things more than just a weekend service. And that just takes time to get those things in place.
Yeah, it does. You said you never know what's all involved until you step out to plant. That's a great word. So, yeah.
Another thing that showed up over and over is kind of the either having a bigger planting team or using our planting team, core team more effectively, worrying more about the relationships than the worship service. Nobody can plant a church by themselves. It's just, you can't do it. It takes a team effort, and we're big APEST guys here, and if the church is going to be healthy and functioning in all aspects, all gifting that it's supposed to function in, you got to have several people on the team that have different giftings and wirings to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
You've got to have those apostolic, run to the margins, new frontiers kind of people. You've got to have the prophetic people that are going to care about what God has to say about what the church is doing. And you need those evangelistic people that are going to share the story of Jesus with everybody they can. You need those teachers that are going to unpack God's word. You need those shepherds that are going to care and protect people. And so there's got to be a place for everybody to play. And the better you leverage the gifts and skills of that team, the more effective the church plant will be.
Yeah, man.
Several guys commented on that, using their team more
Yes.
effectively.
Shared leadership, man. You get a guy leading in isolation, you're gonna have problems. Whether it's a shepherd who's totally inward and just cares about the needs of others, which is totally needed. But if you don't have an apostolic voice in that, moving people out, and then if you got an apostle leading in isolation who's always wanting to do new things and get out there, but you don't have a voice saying, hey, but what about how we're going to sustain that and whatever. That's huge. Shared leadership is just massive. And, all our guys want to start with elders. I mean, almost exclusively, but very few of them have seen elders function, been a part of a church where elders functioned at all, much less well. And none of them have ever led an elder team. So there's even that, like, what's your ecclesiological structure for your shared leadership? And have you fleshed out roles and responsibilities and what that looks like? And most guys don't. And man, I've seen it work. I have not seen it work very well in most of the plants. Some of them work okay, but a lot of it, it's just, you don't know how to do it, so.
Well, and here's the reality. If you don't clarify roles, responsibilities, and expectations early on so that everybody knows what they're getting into, knows what they're supposed to do, then they will impose roles, responsibilities, and expectations on the church plant. And oftentimes it will run contrary to the vision and plan that the planner had in mind when they started. We've seen it over and over and over. I had one of our really successful church planners done very, very well in a lot of different areas. I asked him one day, I said, okay, you're 6 years in now. What have you learned? What'd you learn early on that has served you well? Now that you're 6 years, he's like 8 or 9 years in now. But he said one of the things you guys told us early on is that you will have to over communicate the vision, clarifying expectations, clarifying direction, where we're going, how we're going to get there. He said, to the point that people start mocking you for it, And he said, when the mockery happens, it's starting to sink in. And he said, I'm telling you, he said, that has saved us so much heartache and trouble when people would come in with trying to impose their expectations on who we were rather than coming on board with who we were and where we were going. And he said it protected us from some people that would have derailed us, and it kept us focused on what God had called us to do. And so, but they put in the time to clarify those expectations early.
Well, and I would say this too, Dave, which may be the other side of this coin. I think it goes very along with what you're saying. If the vision for your church plant was crafted by you, the planter, in a room with a piece of paper by himself, you need to start over. Like
Yeah.
if you craft a vision for your church with others from day one,
Yeah.
people participate in what they plan.
That's
So
right.
what Sonny, isn't that Sonny Tucker?
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to give people skin in the game if you want them to have skin in the game.
Yep.
If you want them to lead and participate and invest, you got to give them a seat at the table and a voice in the process. And so starting, I think a lot of guys, again, they live with it for so long and months that when it comes down to it, they just kind of go, bah, like that.
Yeah.
And the people on their team haven't lived with it like they have.
Yeah.
And haven't processed it like they have, and haven't gone through the same steps that they have of struggle and what are we going to do about this? And these people aren't being reached. So if you don't take the time to really get with other people and let that soak a little bit, that's what I think hinders a lot of guys too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, those are kind of the big things that guys said, slow down, pray more, clarify expectations.
Yeah.
Share leadership, use your team better, and have fun. Have fun. This is a great thing that God's called you to. Can have great impact, for the kingdom and really, add to the life of the community and bring transformation there. So have some fun along the way and just watch what God might do. So hopefully that's helpful and get you thinking about some things. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Grind.
Keep grinding.